Future Wizards of Wall Street, let's work some Excel 365 magic by using the stock feature in the data ribbon to look up all sorts of corporate data and gain insights on some of the largest firms in the United States. Let's learn. So let's open Excel with a new blank workbook. We'll expand the window to full screen. We'll zoom into 200%, and I'll save this keyboard shortcut Command S on Mac, Control S on Windows, with the name Working with Stock Data. In A1, let's enter the label name, and below that, we're going to enter the name of some firms commonly referred to in the business press as the FAANG companies. That's F-A-A-N-G, and that stands for, as I type the names downward in column A, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google, although Google's parent company is now called Alphabet and consists of all sorts of firms, including companies in healthcare, driverless cars, and all sorts of other wild projects. When you make as much money as Google does in their core business, you can afford to take these big risks. Alphabet calls them moonshots. Now let's turn Excel into a magic data gathering machine by using the stock feature on the Data tab. Now this feature is only available in the 365 version of Excel, so if you're using an Excel version with a year after it, like Excel 2016, you probably don't have access to this feature. So hopefully you've got that if you're continuing with this video. Using the stock feature is really easy. Just highlight the name of the firms that you want to access data on, and this will work with all recognizable firms, stock symbols as well. Data access even works for exchange-traded funds, so think mutual funds that also have ticker symbols. And with the names of the firms highlighted, we'll click on the Data tab, and right underneath that is this icon that says Stocks. Click that. We see Excel churns away and matches up the names with the various ticker symbols, indicating that we can get data on all of these firms. Now, a few things to note. Microsoft provides a disclaimer at the top saying that this data is provided as is. They actually use a third party to deliver this data. At the time the video is recorded, the data comes from a company named Refinitiv, and it's critical to be aware that this data is delayed. The data that you're seeing on US markets has a 15-minute delay. Now, you can get data from international markets, but be aware that that data might be delayed even more. So if you're accessing during trading hours, you're not seeing data in real time. And you can click on the Learn More button up here if you're curious about other limitations in the data. I'm just going to click the X next to the disclaimer line to get rid of that. Now, the data is actually great for learning purposes, and for those students that are also studying with our IS textbook, it's a nice way to get fairly accurate data on many of the firms that we're studying. Now, if all of your values have this little Parthenon-looking icon, I think that's supposed to look like the New York Stock Exchange. That indicates that Excel has made a match with whatever you typed into this field and its data source. Also, if you look in column A, you can see in parentheses here the ticker symbol that Excel used to make this match, and to the left of that, in front of the colon, Excel indicates the stock exchange where the symbol is listed. So if you see XNAS, that means the NASDAQ Stock Exchange. If you ever see XNYS, that means the New York Stock Exchange. There are other exchanges too, but for large US-based firms, you should expect to almost always see the NYSE or the NASDAQ. In fact, if you don't see XNYS or XNAS, make sure that Excel hasn't made a match with data on another exchange that you're not interested in. So while we're here, let's also look at what would happen if Excel can't make a match. So I'm going to replace the entry for Alphabet down here. I'd originally typed in Google, and instead I'll type in Goggle, G-O-G-G-L-E. And no stock exchange icon for this guy, just a circle with a question mark in it, indicating that Excel did not make a match with the data source. And if I return to this cell, Excel shows a selector pane over here on the right-hand side, and there's a search box up top where I can search for a data source match. So if I type in Google, Excel's smart enough to know that I probably meant Alphabet. Now, Alphabet is a bit of a complex listing. You can see if you look down on the results here, SIX, this stock is actually listed on the Swiss Stock Exchange. There's another listing for the Santiago Stock Exchange in Chile. So we can actually click and drag on the left-hand side of the selector pane here to give us a little bit more room to be able to read our choices. And Google's also a tricky stock because they have a Class A and a Class C stock. You can buy Class A shares that have voting rights, but you can also buy Class C shares without voting rights. So A shares trade under the symbol GOOG-L, C shares trade under GOOG, G-O-O-G. C shares usually trade with a small discount. On the day that I'm recording this, that discount's coming up at about $3 on a stock that's valued at over $1,400. This is probably more information you need to know, but for students also using our companion Information Systems Business Technology textbook, the founders have a special class of Google stock, Class B shares, that are not publicly traded and that have share values weighted at 10 times the voting right of standard shares. Now, most founders actually that take their firms public can't demand this kind of control, but if you run a hot company that looks like it's going to win in a winner-take-all market, you might be able to make these kinds of demands. An even more extreme example is Facebook. Facebook is a publicly traded stock, but Zuck owns special shares that are weighted to give him a guaranteed majority of the voting rights. So if you own Facebook, you're pretty much just along for the ride. It is Zuck's firm. Anyway, we could select either of these symbols, Goog L or Goog. Either one will give us the data that we want, even when we take a look at total shares outstanding later on. So if you have a discrepancy like this, what I really advise you to do is to search online for the company's ticker symbol on its main stock exchange and just enter that. Now, just to show you that Excel accepts either symbol, I'm going to click here to select this option with the symbol Goog, G-O-O-G, but I can also change that. So now I'll go back to the alphabet cell and I'll type in Goog L. That's the stock that's usually a little bit more expensive, but comes with voting rights. Now, another very cool thing, if you continue to type in firm names or ticker symbols in this column, Excel will attempt to find a match. So this will only work for the publicly traded companies. If I type in Uber just below Alphabet, Excel recognizes this as a firm that trades on the New York Stock Exchange. See how in parentheses we now have XNYS, that's for New York Stock Exchange, and after the colon you see the symbol UBER. But if you put in a firm that hasn't gone public, there's been no initial public stock offering, Excel probably doesn't have any data on that firm. For example, as I record this video, Rent the Runway is not a publicly traded company, so if I try to type in the name Rent the Runway just below Uber, Excel doesn't have a match. It just shows a circle with a question mark in it. I can click back on the question mark in that cell, open the selector pane. Excel has no suggestions for me. If I try to backspace over what's in there and just type the word in rent, I get no info on Rent the Runway. So remember, just because we've heard of a company doesn't necessarily mean we can get public data on that firm. Now I'm going to delete these last two rows and focus just on the FAANG. Now if I click on the cell containing Facebook, I see an icon just to the upper right of this cell. The icon looks like a rectangular list with a plus sign in the upper left. So click that and you can see all of the data that Excel can provide. So let's scroll down here and select price. Excel puts the stock price for Facebook in this cell just to the right. Now this also works on multiple cells at once, so I can select all of the cells that were linked using the stock feature in Excel. And if I pull down and select price here, I see that I've just added a column with the stock price for all of these firms. That's looking good, so I don't need column B anymore. I'm going to delete this. And now I can also turn this data into an Excel table. I'll get all of these same benefits, it's just the little box to select the data fields will show up at a different location. So to create a table, I'm going to first click somewhere inside of the data that I want to become a table, and this time I'll create the table in yet another way. You can use any of the ways you learned before, but also know that if you go to the Insert tab up here, there's a table icon here, and it's just like pressing the table shortcut key. I'll click this, the Create Table dialog box shows up, press OK, and here's our table. Now the field selection option for our stock shows up in the lower right-hand corner, not the upper right, but anything you select in here will be applied to the entire table. Now before we select any data, I'm going to change the label for column B to price. Then I'm going to select 52-week high and 52-week low. Two columns have been added to our table. They're also formatted like our table. This data was fresh as of about 15 minutes ago when I recorded this video, just like magic. Thank you, Excel. Now, since the phrase 52-week is repeated in these columns, let's break it out and put it above these two columns. So to do this, I'm going to insert a row above row 1, then I'll change C2 so that it just contains the word high, and I'll change D2 so it contains low. And then let's right justify or right align the headers in B2 through D2. And I'll use the format painter to copy the format from the header line of my table and apply it to row 1. So I'm going to click into cell A2, click the format painter, then I'll click and drag across the top row from A1 through D1, and I'm going to type 52 week as the header in C1. And now it's time for a new technique. So instead of performing a merge and center across C1 and D1, we're going to select the cells C1 through D1, and I'm going to center across those two cells. So with C1 through D1 selected, I'm going to right click on the selection that I just made. This brings up the context sensitive menu, and one of the options that I have here is to select format cells. So select this, you get a bunch of different tabs across the top of this dialog box, select the alignment tab, then pull down where it says horizontal alignment, and we see that we can center across the selection. So select that option, then select OK to dismiss this dialog, and we haven't merged across these cells, but we have centered the data in C1 across both of these cells. Nice! Yet another formatting trick. Now this looks very nice. Once you set up a table like this, you can continue to type in names or symbols of firms in the name column, and Excel will try to find a lookup match for that data, and then it will populate the rest of the table for you. So let's try this with a couple of firms that are within just a few miles of where I'm recording this video. So TripAdvisor is just kind of down the street from me, so we'll type in Trip here, and looks like they're struggling a little bit. COVID has been really rough on them. They're right at their 52-week low. Wayfair also hires a bunch of my students. They're not at their 52-week high, but they're way above their low for the year. So you can see how you can quickly build a really robust data set and a table using Excel's lookup feature. So now let's rename this worksheet FAANG. We'll delete Trip and Wayfair. And now let's show you how we can do even more with stock lookup and tables by grabbing a bit of data from the web to use at the start. So let's click on the plus button to create a new worksheet, and we'll name this worksheet Most Profitable, because we're going to get data on the 20 most profitable firms in the United States, and we'll add some data using Excel's stock feature so that we can find the market capitalization or total stock market value of the firm, and then we'll calculate each firm's value per employee and profit per employee. So first I'm going to zoom this worksheet to 200% so it's easier to see, and then I'm going to go to an open browser and I'll search for the same page we used in the earlier video. So my search is on largest firms in the United States by revenue. And I'm going to open the same Wikipedia page that we worked with before. And now we know that revenue does not equal profit, but if we scroll down below the revenue table here in all 500 entries, we see there's another table that shows profitability. It only has 20 firms in there, but we'll take it. So let's highlight this whole table with profits in it. We'll copy it, return to Excel, and we'll paste it into our new worksheet using the same match destination formatting paste option that we learned about in the prior video lesson. We'll also clean this data up the same way we did before. We'll copy USD millions from cell D2, we'll click D1, type in a space, and then paste in the contents of D2, then we can delete row 2, and let's make this a table. So I'll click anywhere inside the data, and I'll use my keyboard shortcut. On Mac, that's Command T, on Windows, it's Control T, click OK, and I've got this nifty table. Looking good. Those skills you're learning are paying off and you can do a lot very quickly. Now the rank column isn't very useful, so I'm going to delete column A, and then I'll select all of the firm names, and then I'll head over to the data tab and select stocks. And Excel churns away and it looks like it's matched most, but not all of these names, so let's clean this up. First, I have a problem with JP Chase. I'm not sure why Excel doesn't recognize this. Now, the best thing to do would be to look up JP Chase's stock symbol and enter that, but instead, with the JP Chase cell highlighted, I can see I've got my data selection over here on the right, and I'm going to change the search field so that it's JP space Morgan and see what Excel comes up with. And now I see a bunch of different options in here. I'm not sure what these will give me. I do know that JP Chase's stock symbol is JPM on the New York Stock Exchange. So I'm going to click this first one and see what I get. And it enters the symbol JPM on the New York Stock Exchange. That's just what I want. And it automatically dumps me down to the alphabet cell, displaying a bunch of additional options in the data selector. I'll click this first alphabet option. That updates the symbol to Goog-L. Now that's actually the best choice for the work we're about to do. But just to show you, we could change this to Goog. That'll give us the share price for the slightly cheaper non-voting shares. You can change this back later on if you want. Then let's head down to the ExxonMobil cell. That's having problems too. I have no idea why Excel doesn't like this. Now, if I backspace over the mobile part, Excel does give me some suggestions, but none of these look like the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. So our better decision, if you don't know the symbol, is to head over to the browser and search for the firm symbol. I'm going to do this in Google Finance, and I see that the symbol for the ExxonMobil Corporation is XOM, listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So I'll head back to Excel, I'll enter XOM in the ExxonMobil cell, and it looks like Excel likes this. Now, the Federal National Mortgage Association is a firm also known as Fannie Mae in the United States, and it's a weird company because it's a private enterprise, but it's sponsored by the United States government, and it is publicly traded. And we're going to see that we don't get all of the data that we want from Fannie Mae, and when that happens, we'll just delete that row since it's an anomaly as a government-sponsored publicly traded firm. But other than that, we've got everything we want. So now let's take a look at the options for the data that we can get now that these firms are set up using Excel's stocks feature. Now, the first thing I'd like to do is to take a look at market capitalization, otherwise known as market cap. Now, market cap is the value of the firm, and it's calculated as share price times the total number of shares outstanding. So in other words, that's how much the firm is worth, at least as is represented by its stock market value. But unfortunately, Excel does not have market cap as one of the options that we can select, but it does have price, the stock price, and it does have shares outstanding, so we can calculate market cap. Let's do it. First, let's select shares outstanding, and wow, these numbers are big. Most firms have over 1 billion shares outstanding. A couple are in the high hundreds of millions, except for Berkshire Hathaway. That's the company that Warren Buffett built. And now right next to that, let's add a column for price. Remember, your prices are likely different because you're looking at the stock market prices at a different time than when I recorded this video. And in column F1, I'll add the header for market capitalization as MKT period CAP. And in F2, let's enter our formula. And we'll do that by saying equal sign, then we'll click the cell for shares outstanding and multiply that by price. And press return, and very big numbers are reflected down the column. The least valuable firm in the group, Citigroup, is still valued at roughly $100 billion. We've even got some firms that are valued at over $1 trillion. And as predicted, we're getting errors down here with Fannie Mae data, so I'm just going to highlight and delete that row. Now, there is some additional weirdness in here because of Berkshire Hathaway. Feel free to research this on your own, but I will say last year's profits were so high they were actually a record for any U.S. company, but that's largely because of a change of financial reporting standards. Now, this is a very successful firm, but the number is so big due largely to an accounting change rather than raw success. Now, it's also got a really big stock price for its main share class. If you're curious, this is a deliberate decision by the firm. Most companies split their share price when their stock price goes up significantly. Berkshire believes that this large share price discourages speculative investors that might get in and out of a stock really quickly, and it encourages the kind of long-term buy and hold investors that keep the stock price more stable over time. Now, they also have a separate class of cheaper shares, but even that class is pretty expensive compared to the average share price of most stocks. All right, enough about the house that Warren Buffett built. Let's make our data easier to read. Now, the market cap figures are so big, and we just want to do some rough comparison among these firms. It'd be nice if we could round these figures so that they were just shown in billions of dollars. Well, the calculation to do that is pretty easy. You can probably think of it on your own. Let's do this now in column G. So in cell G1, let's put in a header in here that says market cap in parentheses B for billions. And then in G2, we'll just take the value in F2 and divide that by a billion. That's 1,000,000,000,000. Press return, and that looks great. Basic grade school math. Now, it's great we have all this data, but we actually don't really want to show all of these columns in our worksheet. Well, fortunately, Excel gives us a way to hide rows and columns, which is really useful in cases like this where we need the columns for calculation, but we don't really want to show the intermediate data or calculation steps to the user. So I just want to show firm profit and market cap. So I want to hide all of the other columns. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag from column D through column F, make that selection. And I don't think I want to show industry either. So I'm going to make a non-adjacent selection by holding down the Command key on the Mac, or it would be Control key on Windows, and I'll click on column B. And now that I've made this entire selection here, I'm going to right click anywhere in the column selection that I just made. The context sensitive menu shows up, and one of the options here is hide. So select that, and the columns are hidden. Now, you know these columns are still there because the letters for the columns jump ahead by however many columns are hidden. It's sort of like taking the columns and setting the width to 0. Now, if you want the columns back, just click and drag so that you highlight the column letters that are around any columns that are hidden. Then you can right-click, select unhide, and the columns come back. Now, this works on rows too, but I want to keep the columns hidden, so I'm going to undo and once again hide those columns. And now let's clean up our table a little bit. I'll adjust my column width. I'd also like the header profits in USD millions to show up on 2 lines instead of 1, but you know how to do that. Just click in cell C1, head to the Home tab, and click on Wrap Text. And I'm going to shrink column C. I'm going to double click between rows 1 and 2 to try to auto fit the row height. And this still needs a little bit of adjusting, but I can click on the columns and drag the columns to try to get the column width right, and then auto fit the row height. This is looking good. It looks like somehow my hidden columns got their size increased, but I can just highlight these 2 guys that are peeking out and hide them. And now this is looking like a really nice table with custom calculated data that leverages both data that we got from the web and data retrieved from Excel's stocks data feature. I'm going to right justify the headers in C and G. Now, let's do a little bit more analysis. Why don't we try to figure out which firms are worth more per employee and also which firms earn more profits per employee? Well, down here in the lower right, we can take a look at the data that Excel can provide us, and sure enough, there's an option for employees. So let's select this, and this gives us a column with the firm's total number of employees. So let's use this in some calculated columns. Our header in I1 will be profit per emp, and in J1, why don't we say value per emp for value per employee? I'm just going to auto-fit the column width for G. And the calculations are pretty straightforward. In I2, we'll say equals, then click the profit column, divided by the employee column. But wait, why does this look so weird? Oh yeah, the profit is listed in millions of US dollars. So how do we fix this? Just multiply the calculation in I2 by 1 million. Now, since our formula is just division, we can just straight up multiply it without the parentheses. But if it's useful to add the parentheses around your division first, you can do that. The result will be the same. Now, these calcs look great. Visa has the highest profit per employee, Walmart the lowest. Here's your quick challenge. Now you calculate the firm's value per employee. So why don't you pause? Give this a shot, and we'll resume and take a look at a solution. So we'll say in cell J2, this equals market cap divided by number of employees, and wait, these values can't be right, and they're not, because the problem is the market cap is valued in billions, so we need to multiply our formula by a billion, and when you work with tables and stock data, it doesn't matter which cell we update, so we can actually update cell J3, and that'll change the cell above it as well as all the ones below it. So let's click in J3, we'll multiply this by a billion, that's 1 and 9 zeros, 3 more than we used in the previous column, press return, and this looks great. Visa once again is the standout, more value per employee, Walmart is once again the lowest. Now why don't we rank the top 5 in each of these categories? First, let's do profit per employee. So we can click on the down arrow in the header and column I, since that's our column for profit per employee. And in the sort and filter dialog, let's press this descending button that nicely orders our data largest to smallest. Close this dialog box, and why don't we highlight the top 5 firms and paste them in their own table to the right. So I'm going to click in A1, drag down to A6, then to make my non-adjacent selection, I'm going to hold down the Command key on Mac, Control key on Windows. I'll click in I1, then drag through I6, then I'll copy the selection, and I'll paste this over in L2. And why don't above this in L1, we'll just give this table a label. How about most profits per employee? And then let's add another label down here in L9, most value per employee. And can you set up this table on your own? Quick challenge. Why don't you pause, see if you can add a similar table below, but with the top 5 in value per employee? Then resume, and let's see how we got the answer. All we need to do is to click the down arrow in the value per employee column. Just to make sure that this takes, I'm going to click on the ascending button and then descending. I can see the reorder behind the box is valued from most value to least value per employee. Very nice. Let's dismiss this box. Then we'll highlight A1 through A6. Hold down Command or Control for the non-adjacent selection. Click J1, drag through J6, copy it, paste it into L10, adjust your column width, and you, my friend, are showing quite a bit of Excel wizardry. Let's add a final bit of polish with one of the table header cells clicked. I'm currently clicked in L10. Let's select the Format Painter, and I'll double click on it so that it stays active. Then I'll click and drag to paint the most value per employee header cells and the most profit per employee header cells. Then I'll click the Format Painter to toggle it off, and we'll do some last minute cleanup. How about we set the profits column to dollars with no decimals, and the employee column shouldn't be in dollars, so let's click on the comma icon, and we'll get rid of the decimals. You can perform whatever final adjustments you'd like. Let's also figure out how we can update the data. The data we're looking at hasn't been refreshed. It has to be refreshed manually, and you can do that by returning to the Data tab and clicking this icon labeled Refresh All. And you might be prompted with a message where Excel reminds you that you're about to get data from the web. We trust Excel to give us data, so we'll press OK. Now, it might take a second to fetch and refresh the data. And also note that if your stock data is linked to a worksheet and you close the worksheet, then open it back up, you'll get a security warning up top. Now, this is just Excel reminding you that you've got linked data and that you need to press this Enable Content button to update the data. And once you do that, the data will update with the freshest data available. So friends, I hope you're feeling good about your skills. We once again covered a lot of ground in this video lesson. We learned to use Excel's stock feature to feed additional data into a spreadsheet. We corrected mismatched firm names and ticker symbols to properly link with Excel's data feed. We used stock data feeds in an Excel table. We centered data across columns. We hid and unhid columns, and we learned to refresh data from stock feeds. Keep at it and keep that learning growth in positive territory.